Welcome, everyone, to the official launch of Transform Films' new documentary, Stranger Sister, and as well as the launch of the national social impact campaign led by Odyssey Impact. My name is Riaz Patel. I'll be your moderator tonight. I am a producer-director. I'm also on the board of Transform Films, although in full disclosure, I just recently joined, so I have nothing to do with what you're going to watch. I can take no credit for it. This amazing piece of work. But it is an amazing film to watch. And what is amazing about what Transform Films does is works with Odyssey Impact to make sure that the film is seen and gets out there. Transform Films is a Peabody Award-winning film production company. Peabody Award is incredibly high esteem, so bravo. And Odyssey Impact is a not-for-profit that's going to spearhead the film's journey to be seen and felt and ideally create the impact that we're all looking for. So we have an incredible panel comprised of 3 parts. We have the story themselves, the stars of the show. Then we have the storytellers, the 2 women who put together this film. And then we're going to talk to the change makers, 3 people who work in the real world to promote this work and to create the change and impact that we're all looking for. So what I'd love to do is have you introduce yourselves and introduce yourself, a little bit about you and how you got into this island of misfit toys that we all are. So we'll start with the women who the story is about, the stars of our evening. We'll start with Atiya. How are you? Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you so much, Riaz, and everybody who's joining us today. I got involved because Sheryl tenaciously reached out to me, and I had the foresight to say, yes, let's do this. So I am the co-founder of the Sisterhood of Salaam, Shalom, chair emerita, and I guess semi-star of the story, of the movie, which is a little uncomfortable to watch sometimes, but so happy to be here. Thank you.
Welcome. And we will now talk to your co-star and your sister, Sheryl. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, thanks, Riaz. And thank you to our incredible filmmakers and to my colleagues on this panel with all of the people that you see here changing the world for all of us. I am the co-founder with Atiya, and I am the founding executive director. The very short story is I was leading a group to Auschwitz and made a commitment that I would never stand back and let history repeat itself. Maybe I couldn't stop it, but I could surely make a dent in the hate that's out there. And that's when I reached out to Atiya, and the rest is history, and you'll learn a lot more about it tonight. And after you watch the film, I'm sure you learned a lot more.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now we're going to talk to our storytellers, who I have a soft spot for because I'm a producer director, and this is a big evening. These journeys start years ago and have incredible difficulties and cuts and long days in edit bays that no one sees. So to our amazing Emmy-winning filmmakers, let's hear from you. Katie, welcome.
Thank you, Riaz. It's such a pleasure to be here tonight. And you're so right. It's a long journey and you never really know when the end point is going to come, and you don't expect it to be on a Zoom necessarily. But I feel just very full tonight and so happy to have all of you panelists with me and all the people out across the country and maybe beyond joining us tonight. I'm an independent documentary filmmaker, a director and producer. I've had the pleasure of working with Transform Films sort of on and off for a few years on some other projects. KIRSTEN and I came across the article in the New York Times in 2016 about the Sisterhood, and both of our interest was definitely piqued. We were the idea of interfaith, the idea of a woman-led organization and movement immediately was of interest to us. When we first went to film with them, I definitely thought it was going to be, before the first night of filming, just a short piece that kind of looked at interfaith projects and thought it might fit in a larger kind of interfaith multi-piece series. And right away, it just hit me that there was more going on in this organization than was going to be crammed into a little 10-minute piece. So it's been just an honor to be part of learning more about the Sisterhood, learning more about Sheryl and Atiya and all the sisters across the country. I personally have been just, transformed myself by the power of this idea of intentional relationships across different cultural groups, across different faith groups, and what the ways in which that can help sort of knit our country back together. So hopefully this is one little step in that process.
Absolutely. It is amazing how you start a project with the best of intentions and the project teaches you what it's about.
Absolutely.
So, and then your co-partner, Kirsten, let's hear from you. Welcome.
You know, tonight is really a filmmaker's dream because you're sitting at the table launching this into the world with such rock star change makers, the people in the story that you spent so much time with. And also in the background, there's a whole team of people from Transform and Odyssey Impact who are making sure that the film is really going to get out there. And they've been doing so much work to plan this moment. And that is truly a dream that doesn't always happen. So just very grateful to Nick Stewart, who's our CEO, who handed us that New York Times article and said, hey, this might make a really, really interesting story. And we were so grateful to be able to do that and to have the support from Transform and Odyssey to say, go make this film in the way it needs to be made. So thank you.
Well, it is both of yours. It's a big night for you to have your work out in the world. So congrats. It's a little scary, but congrats on that. Now, the next circle of people on our panel are real world change makers. They are people creating the impact on the ground, boots on the ground every single day. Three incredibly dynamic people. Let's start with Mark. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be with all of you tonight. I'm Mark Fowler. I'm the CEO of the Tannenbaum Center for Interreligious Understanding. Our mission is to combat religious prejudice, to promote justice, and build respect for religious difference. And it is an honor to be a part of this project that has been ongoingly the living example of what it means and what it takes to build respect for religious difference, that it is not something that can be done in a webinar or just by reading a book, but it really does take being engaged in an intentional manner with people who you very well may differ with, but you have a commitment to understand. So we're honored to be a part of this work and to promote it as much as we can.
Wonderful. Welcome. And JALAYA, welcome to you. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm JALAYA LILES-DUNN. I'm with the Southern Poverty Law Center as the news director for Learning for Justice. As the Law Center, our mission is to dismantle hate and white supremacy, to focus on the intersection of movements, and to advance human rights. So we're in the right space, the right conversation, and we are excited about connecting with people and others who are doing this great work.
Welcome. And your mom's here. Is your mom here? Do we know?
She should be. She should be here. We talked before it started, and I made sure she had all the login information.
Give mom a shout out.
My mom is in South Carolina. Hi, Mom. Her name is Jennifer Lyles, and she's an educator.
Nice. Speaking of Jennifer, that's a perfect segue. We're going to go to Jennifer. That worked beautifully. Nicely done. So Jennifer, please introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you. What a pleasure to be here with everyone on this call. It's I'm really just honored to be even a small part of this conversation. I'm an educator. I currently work as the senior advisor at the Pluralism Project at Harvard University. And the Pluralism Project was started by Diana Eck over 25 years ago to really look at the growing diversity, religious diversity across the country, and what kinds of encounters and implications of those encounters are developing, and how can we document and understand those. So I really enjoyed working with that team. And before that, I was actually a university chaplain at Tufts. And prior to that, my primary work was really field building around interfaith or interreligious studies in the academy, and trying to get a lot of the work that we're going to be thinking about and talking about here tonight on the radar of academics, and thinking together about how to study that and how to broadcast more widely what's happening in many of these grassroots communities around the country. So thrilled to be here. The film is fabulous, and the work that these folks have done really is like exactly the kind of example of interfaith work that I love to see and talk about.
Wonderful, wonderful. We are now going to introduce you to Atiya and Olivia. They are co-leaders from the Sisterhood team chapter, and they're going to be moderating questions from the chat at all times. So again, as questions come up for you, please do enter them into the chat and we will get to them. Towards the end of the film, we're going to show you a short clip. At the end of the discussion, we're going to show you a small short film clip about their work, which is pretty incredible. So I'm going to throw to them. Welcome, Atiya and Olivia.
Thank you, Riaz. As chat moderators, we want to encourage everyone to just be involved, comment, share your thoughts, ask questions. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're thinking. So thank you for being here.
And we will be closely following the chat to answer questions and share background and information on the Sisterhood. We want this to be as interactive an experience as possible, so please be aware that when you post a chat item, we encourage you to share with everyone by choosing all panelists and all attendees.
Great, thank you. And they will be coming back later towards to bring us some questions from the chat. So some of you have not seen the film. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you the trailer. But for those of you that have, we have an interactive challenge for you, if you will. The film team is going to create an inspiring social media piece with your input. And what we would like you to do is please put one word in the chat that comes to mind when either you think about the film or the work of the Sisterhood. Just one word that comes to mind as you think about the film, their work, and what we're gonna do is create some piece of art out of that. And that'll be sent as a surprise as a follow-up to this event. So please take that time, put the one word in as you think about it. As you see the trailer, feel free to put that one word in as it comes together. Before we roll the trailer, we're gonna thank the Lori M. Tisch Illumination Fund. And we're going to thank the Lilly Endowment, because if you show up to set without money to pay the crew and get equipment, they don't do anything. So thank you for that, because we do need those for stories to move forward. So thank you to both of them. So now what we're going to do is we're going to roll the trailer, please.
You know my friend Evan? She's headed to Austin.
The United States has a right to control who enters our country.
And she saw this big bus full of riled up white guys.
Religious-inspired hate crimes are on the rise.
Police suspect possible hate crime.
The Chicago Loop Synagogue, a sledgehammer to a window.
Swastikas on the front door.
We heard that there were quite a few other anti-Muslim protests, like maybe 19 or 20.
In major cities, Chicago, Boston.
The mosques are going to be full tonight.
Yep.
Which mosque?
Shalom alaikum to everybody. I stand in front of you as a Muslim woman, as an immigrant, and it is my great pleasure to stand with those who are being demonized today.
A travel ban against Muslims for those of us who are Jewish brings back our darkest fears. We're here to share prayer, and this is going on across the country. Over 1,000 women just tonight doing the exact same thing.
For you all, there are snakes in this grass.
In every interview, what do you guys really do with Palestine and Israel?
How can you trust them?
Oh my God, verbatim. Yeah, how do you trust the Muslims? How do you trust the Jews?
We don't share religious beliefs. We don't have to share political beliefs.
We have not squarely talked about this issue.
We haven't.
Why are we?
That's what I've been
Why
saying.
are we stalling? What is the fear?
Two co-leaders, one Jewish, one Muslim. So right now, when we're being inundated with all this horrible news, this bomb threat, that phone call, these children evacuated, you can't help but feel compassion because you felt it yourself.
Salaam, everyone.
In Hebrew, we say Shalom. Shalom.
And Islam, we say Salam.
Shalom. So that's also what our name is, Sisterhood of Salam Shalom.
For this kind of conversation, we want to lead with what we're not certain about.
a call to prayer.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm getting so
100%.
emotional. No, I think just us coming together to pray, I think that was really powerful.
Yes.
Trauma healing is the basis of peace building.
There's no country that I could go to that's my safe space. I'm an American.
So where do you go from here? You take back your cities, you take back your states, you take back your countries, you raise your voice, you pray with your feet.
Yay, Kirsten, Katie, it's out there. It's out there. So let's start with the subject of the movie. So Atiya and Sheryl, when you first connected to each other, I think Sheryl, you called a couple of times, and Atiya, you didn't call back immediately. I want to go back and see what was the thinking at that time to this idea, because obviously it's evolved, but at the very beginning, what was your thinking initially?
So when Sheryl called me initially, it was, first of all, she says on the message something like, "Hi, I'm a Jewish woman and I want to meet a Muslim woman." And I just was like, who is this woman? And then the second call came, and then the third call came, which was on my cell phone. So I really could not hide then. And I had, my feelings inside were a couple. One was, I really did not have positive experience with interfaith. I was on the board at my mosque at that time. I still am. And unfortunately, it just wasn't a very uplifting experience for me. It's very male dominated, very much of, speaking more in an academic way or in a theological way rather than in a lived way of how do you live your faith. So I just was a bit skeptical. I also had in the back of my mind concerns that, what are people going to say if I'm meeting with a Jewish person? My reputation had been someone who had been in marches for Palestine. So that was there too. But then, on the opposite side, why should I care what people are thinking? This beautiful woman is reaching out to me, so loving. When we met, it was a spark of electricity. And how could I not, as a Muslim, as my values, probably all human values, not say yes when she's extending her hand to me in peace and in love and in friendship. So it was this kind of journey. And when we sat down, we came up with this idea that was really different from anything that we had ever seen before. How do we live our faith? What can we do for each other and stand up for each other that is shared within our faith communities? So it was kind of a journey for me, and just like probably just a couple of weeks until we really knew what we wanted to do.
Sheryl, why were you so persistent in the calls? What was it that you were going towards that you were so persistent?
It's really the whole basis of the sisterhood, which is it's easy to hate someone you don't know. When you know them, it's harder. And when you care and love them, it's impossible. And after walking on that holy ground of Auschwitz, I knew that I had to make the move. And it's not coincidental that at that point, my first grandchildren who are twins, were born. And I just was petrified for the future. And I said, I have to protect them. I have to make the change. And I was not willing to give up on Atiya. And what was going through my head at the time was, oh my God, she won't call me back because I'm Jewish. I know this can't be true. I know we can make a change. And so I'm not going to give up. And when I got that phone call, I could tell you exactly where I was. And it was in the middle of Ramadan when you called Atiya. And Atiya's right. We met and it was truly love at first sight. The sister that I never had, I gained a sister and I gained another family. And there were sparks of electricity, and we've transferred those sparks to over 8,000 women across the United States, Canada, and now parts of Europe.
If I could, Riaz, we often, like as Sheryl says, she thought maybe I didn't call her back because she was Jewish, but really I didn't call her back because I was working. I had young kids. It was Ramadan, and I was just busy. And so it just kind of shows how we have this conversation going on in our heads that is not always, helping us move forward. So I think that was, it all worked out. When I called her, it really was, I was busy. I mean, granted, I had hesitations about a project. At that point, I didn't even know there was a project, that she was going to suggest. But for sure, I said, sure, I'll absolutely meet you. Let's have coffee together. So.
Well, thank goodness you were so persistent, Sheryl. Thank goodness you were so persistent. Let's shift to the storytellers. Katie and Kirsten, can you tell us what compelled you to tell this story as filmmakers when neither of you are Jewish or Muslim? What was it about this story that resonated with you?
Well, a couple things. At this point, many things. But the first seeds that were planted for me, as I said, and when I first spoke, we originally thought this might be a shorter piece. The sort of gravitas of both these women and what I saw even that first night of filming made it clear this was going to be a longer piece. I also immediately felt, and the first night of filming was at a vigil that was in support, well, rather kind of against the Trump Muslim ban that started in January 2017. So that Sheryl and Atiya had agreed to let us come film there and just start to get to know each other a little bit. And it was such a moving event. And I was struck by all the what you can imagine in terms of the power of these intentional relationships. But there was also right from the beginning for me, this question or this interest in how Sheryl and Atiya were helping to foster an entire new group of leadership, a new model of how women might become leaders, even women who had never thought of themselves as leaders, and taking this home-based, friendship-based model. And I don't even know if this ever occurred to them when they started the movement. But that for me from the beginning and grew as we started to go into homes and film was like, wow, these are all these women who never would have thought of themselves leading a movement. And yet here they are. These are the leaders. And that has been with me since almost the beginning. And it felt so much larger than either faith group. It's always felt that it would speak to everyone. I mean, it spoke to me so deeply. I knew we had a larger message to share.
I actually love what you said. I think there's something very beautiful about leaders who are not sort of geared to lead. I think a lot of America is now led by people who believe they are the leaders and 100%. They deserve to be leading. And it's lovely to see people step into that role who don't have the ego of it, if I may say that.
And in fact, it's, everyone who comes into the sisterhood the act of starting intentional relationships is already leadership. You're already taking a leadership step. And so it's like, once they take that first little step, you see women just gain more and more courage to take the next step and the next step. And then you see women transform at these conferences, at these regional meetings. And it's just incredible to see.
Wonderful. Kirsten, what do you want to add?
Oh, you're mute.
You're mute. Look at you. You're so used to being a producer behind the scenes. It's so uncomfortable.
No, I'm usually behind, so I don't have to worry about it.
You may speak.
Oh my goodness. At that time, it was really about hope and possibility. And, there was a lot of projects and films and things happening about covering sort of the chaos that was going on in the world at that time. And this was a story about possibility. And, I think we were all involved in doing rallies and marches and figuring out how do we stay involved in a positive way in our own lives. And, this was what we saw was a story where it wasn't about rallies and marches, although that is part of it. It was about what could happen in your own living room. And this idea of possibility, of change, reaching across lines of difference, of trying to get beyond divisions to a more healthy place could happen in our very own rooms. And making that film about that, I think, as we followed it for the next 2 years, that just was like a beacon of hope in our own lives, because, you were seeing all of this kind of chaos continuing to happen and the hate incidents and the hate crimes rising. It was like, okay, just keep going, keep making this film, because it is a balm to what is happening. There is direct, this is a response that is possible.
Actually, I would love to talk to Atiya about that. You know, there's something I think we all felt in the past year, specifically being at home, news and information coming at us because of the way news works, most of that negative, because that drives revenue and eyeballs. I love about this is that it's a living room model. Can you talk a bit about, like, you know, we feel so helpless at times that we're sitting back and news is coming at us. In doing this, what did you teach people about the empowerment to take back your own voice and power, that it's done in living rooms? You know, it's not done in state capitals or it's done in living rooms. Can you talk a bit about that journey, about bringing people power in their own living rooms, in their own homes?
Sure, and that was very intentional. You know, Katie just touched upon that. When Sheryl and I met, as I mentioned, I was on the board at my mosque. Sheryl is married to a rabbi and a mother of 2 rabbis. It would have been very natural for both of us to bring it to our houses of worship and do something with, you know, those institutions, but we very intentionally did not. And you know, for some of the reasons that I just mentioned before, but you know, on the positive side, it was really to say, let's literally open up our living rooms. Right. And when Sheryl and I, you know, after we had our initial meeting, we got together with 5 other Muslims, 5 other Jewish sisters, and we literally sat in my living room in my house. And, you know, talk about the more sparks flying. Sparks were flying left and right. It was a weeknight, and we looked up at the clock and it was midnight, because we just could not believe how many things we had to talk about, how many things we had in common, how many things we didn't know about each other. And we couldn't, you know, we could have kept going on, you know, maybe that's how women are. I don't know. I'll take that. We could have kept going. And that's when we said, you know what, we are creating a space, and not just we all were creating this space that people felt comfortable talking about perhaps difficult issues and personal issues. You cannot in your office ask somebody, why are you doing that? Why are you wearing that? Why are you eating that? Or why are you not eating that? But when you're in somebody's home and you're making somebody feel comfortable, they're looking around and seeing how you live your values. They're maybe meeting your family because they're also in your home. And you're putting people in a space where they can ask a question that may seem rude, may seem ignorant. And there's a lot of beautiful things that can happen when you create those spaces. And that's why we are a grassroots organization, because every sister who's involved here, who opens up their living room, is part of that. They're the ones who are creating that space and creating a place for really meaningful dialogue, and therefore action. Speech is action.
Not just words, not just words. We're all a little tired of words. So I'm going to open it up now to our change makers. Jennifer, let me ask you, this idea of polarization, of us and them, we versus the other, where does that come from? What if it's natural? And then how do we approach the work, knowing, you know, that that's really the polarization that we all feel every single day?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think it's important to say a couple things about that. One is, this is something we all do. I mean, part of just normal development is this process of saying, this is me, this is not me, right? So there's this differentiation that's constantly going on. But if we let that be unexamined, or if we let that be influenced by things like propaganda, for example, we can start developing these categories of self and other that get very rigid and very caricatured. Jonathan Sacks, Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, has this wonderful phrase he uses, pathological dualism. So it's as if this natural tendency that's really as old as time suddenly takes on a kind of pathology. And the danger there, and what's I think really beautiful about this film, because it's really counteracting this danger, the danger is the process of dehumanization. So as soon as we start claiming all the positive categories and qualities of personhood for ourselves and those like us, however we're going to define that, and we project onto everyone else all those qualities we don't like or don't want to see in ourselves, then we can start slowly but surely sort of turning the knob down on our sense of the other as fully human. And that's when you get into some really dangerous territory. And I think it can seem so far afield, these, places where genocides have occurred, But if you go back and study the history of how they come to be, you are going to start with the kind of rhetoric and the kind of language that otherizes and dehumanizes, and slowly but surely, you know, you can justify all kinds of things if they are an infestation, a disease, and you start listening for this kind of language and looking for it. You will find it in our news stories and in other kinds of coverage. And that's what really concerns me the most. And the antidote for that is the process of humanization. And the way you do that is through relationship building. So the work that these women are doing is just so powerful. And the model is so approachable that really anyone can join and anyone can participate. And if you happen not to be Jewish or Muslim, you can also ask yourself, from where I'm sitting, what are the needs? Who am I? What do I have to offer? What is missing that maybe I can create? So it's a model that I think has implications and invitations for all of us, regardless of where we're sitting.
Mara, when you talk about learning to hate, learning in terms of systematic systems of racism, let's talk about sort of education. Mark, when we were doing our sort of pre-meeting, we're all getting to know each other, so we didn't show up on a Zoom and we're like, So we were doing a pre-meeting and you were talking about this concept of courageous authenticity. And that education in general, you know, needs to acknowledge this, deal with this, focus on this in some way to moving forward. Can you talk about sort of how education can be a tool in this way to help change this kind of learning?
Well, absolutely, and thank you for the question. I think that when I talk about it, when we talk about courageous authenticity, part of it has to do with Tannenbaum's commitment to transform individuals and institutions. And that educational process is not just limited to the K through 12 school. It takes place in the workplace. It takes place in the healthcare sector. It certainly takes place at the university level in the fields of peace building that we work in. And when we're looking at what does it take to actually engage with someone who not only I understand is different from me, but actually different in value from me. That somehow my life and my existence is better than theirs, than whoever theirs is. And to actually share about where that comes from in your own history, whether you've learned it in your house of worship and in your home and in your community, there is a level of courage that's necessary to actually address and say to someone, this is how I learned to hate. This is what I'm bringing to the encounter that we're having right now. And that step of courage allows the person to evaluate it and lay it down, and at least put it to the side so that an interaction can take place. I was just thinking about two of our peacemakers in action, one who's unfortunately deceased right now, Osnat and Najiba, were two women, one Muslim, one Jewish in Israel, both principals of schools, of elementary schools, that were divided by a line in the town, and who, when the Second Intifada took place, actually got together and they brought all the principals together and said, we need to do something. They were the only two women at the table. And while the men were talking about what they might do, they kind of went off to the side and said, this is what we're going to do. And they didn't have a name for it. It just became known as the project. And their whole goal was to provide space and time for the children to come and just know one another. And so I do have some thoughts about contact theory and some of its limits without the component of courage. And I think what the film definitely exhibits, and what Sheryl and Atiya have done in their walking prayer, is they have not just exhibited courage, they have provided the opportunity for other women to experience their own courage and power.
Amen. Amen. That is the That is the power of the film. It is a stone dropped in a pond that creates ripples and constant ripples. And that's what your work is doing. We talked about houses of worship. We talked about schools and education. JALAYA, I want to turn it to you in terms of the community, the larger community as a whole. You're at the Southern Poverty Law Center. In terms of systems of racism that exist in communities, what is the work that you're doing there? And can you comment about how these systems exist and how they perpetuate this polarization?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. Because when I saw the film and hearing the stories, it all starts from the system was designed to work. So it does work. There's a monolithic sense of power or there's a pluralistic sense of power. And our job is to defy the monolithic power. People have power, people power. If we can start breaking that cycle and saying, there's not one set of power, it's not indestructible, it's not this big source and universe that keeps you from making a change. And there are people who can make their own change. So I love the fact that when we talk about systems change, we talk about people power, which is real evident. And in a side note, women power. Women have been the lead of movement of change agents for if you want something done, we would say, call a woman, call women, we can get it done. And so the systems change concept of it's all about dismantling power. It's a value system that feeds into these root causes of ways of hate and what it's bred out of from just a root cause of systems, and it leads into institutions and systems that now you see the symptoms of why this is happening. And so it's hard for people to sometimes feel like they can even address change looks like and what social justice looks like if they see that those symptoms that are so many. But when we get down to the root cause and we understand first thing first is that we have power, people have power, and we come together and bring people, and you have to educate people. And that's one thing the Southern Poverty Law Center, and through my work with Learning for Justice particularly, we're education piece, we're education arm, and we use educators, and we're reaching out to families and communities and saying, you have power. You can bring about change. What's in your hand? What do you have? You don't need. I love the living room model. I love the living room model because you go door to door. The civil rights movement. Everyone wasn't on the front line at the voter registration and maybe educating the freedom schools model, but what they were doing was breaking bread back home and providing homes for young people to come stay in. And so they were all a part of this systems change in this type of what power looked like in different levels of what you can bring to the table. So when you think of systems change, I always go back to people power, using people's story, using the power of self and the story of self, and finding uplifting your story and then connecting with someone else's story and say, this is our story of us, our shared values. And then thinking about that story of now. And so what can we do? How are our values at crisis now? And what is challenging our values? And how do we take a shared value set and we address and we come together and we fight for our values? And that's what I saw in this film. It's very key to what we're doing at the Southern Poverty Law Center around system change. And how do you disrupt root causes of this? Get to the root cause and start with the power of people. Power of people can get you to that root cause that can get to those systems that can eventually hit those multitude of symptoms that we feel like are so insurmountable at sometimes in our lives.
I think the feeling that how do we take down, how do we adjust these huge things? It is through individual action. It absolutely is. And I think we forget that. And I think the film reminds you that it is individuals that have power. Well, I've been seeing some amazing questions in the thread. So I'm going to bring ASIYAH and OLIVIA in. They're going to appear again now in the Zoom and maybe share a question that they've seen in the thread coming up, because there are a few that I think would be quite interesting to bring to our panel. Hello, girls, ladies, sorry. I'm just so old. My daughter's 4.
We have a question from Foster City, California for Sheryl and Atiya. Where do you wish to see the sisterhood 5 years from now?
Atiya, I'll take that one. It's both of our dreams that the sisterhood will not have to be. We won't need the sisterhood. Will that happen in 5 years? Probably not. It's our goal to have every single Muslim and Jewish woman and teenage girl in relationships, sustainable relationships. And that's how we will be changing the world. We've got about 9,000 women and girls involved now. There's a lot more to get involved. And that's where, God willing, inshallah, we will be in 5 years.
Atiya, anything you want to add to that?
I think that if that comes to fruition, then guess what? There are going to be some major changes.
Yes. Yes. ASIYAH, what have you got for us?
Yes, so our second question is from Brooklyn, New York, and it's for Sheryl and Atiya. What was the most surprising Sisterhood chapter location established thus far?
That's an easy one. Berlin, Germany.
Oh.
And Sheryl and I had a great opportunity a little over a year ago, right? This was right before the lockdown, to be in Berlin together. The Sisterhood received an award in Berlin, and we were able to actually kick off one of their early meetings before they, I think, officially formed. And we're so happy in a country like Germany, what Germany's been through to bring Muslim and Jewish women together in Berlin.
Amazing. That is. Do we have another one? I have one that's come through that says from Detroit, Michigan. Does the Sisterhood do work in the K through 12 school system? If you were, what do you think your message would be? And I think that actually probably is a question for Olivia and ASIYAH, because that really is the work that you guys are spearheading. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yes, I can go first. Or ASIYAH, do you want to go first? Or is that okay? Okay. So the sisters that we have in our teen chapters are from 7th grade through 12th grade, and they can all be chapter members. And in the short clip that you will see coming up, you'll see that we actually do go into classrooms, and we do teach about commonalities between Islam and Judaism, and just show to our youth that, we can have friendships, we can have interfaith friendships, and beyond that, we can create a better world.
Fantastic. ASIYAH?
Definitely. And just to echo a bit of what Olivia said, I think my experience with the Sisterhood has really been focused on education and just learning from one another. And like you all have said previously, it's about relationship building and just creating sisterhood and just creating friendships that will last forever. I still talk to the members that were part of my chapter in high school. We still stay in communication. So it's about creating long-lasting relationships. So yeah, that's
nice.
My 2 cents.
Let's actually right now, why don't we see a short clip about the inspiring work that the teen Sisterhood chapters are doing right now in their community. So let's roll that clip.
I'm Olivia, and I am Jewish.
I'm Leanne, and I'm Muslim. And ever since a young age, I was always kept in the mosque.
I went to a Jewish day school throughout my whole life until high school.
I never really knew the Jewish side of things in regards to a synagogue or just the entire Jewish religion as a whole.
High school, it was definitely a little bit less sheltered.
And I think this group has really opened up my eyes to the similarities that we do have in between us.
There were people from different religions, different cultures, different backgrounds. And that really, I guess, was kind of life-changing for me.
We live in such a tense political climate right now, and so many people are at odds with each other, and it's so divided.
Hi everybody, we're the Sisterhood of Salaam, Shalom.
A group that unites Muslim and Jewish teens in our case, and we are very excited to teach you about the similarities between Islam and Judaism.
Yeah, that sounds perfect. Does anyone know the Muslim holy book?
Quran.
Does anyone know the Muslim word that ends a prayer?
Amen.
The Sisterhood is just all aimed around eliminating ignorance and just building bridges between Muslims and Jewish people. It's just great to find something that you can do within your community, just knowing that we're making a difference.
All the outreach that we've gotten to do together is so empowering.
We're working on this project to donate feminine hygiene supplies and purses to the Safe and Sound shelter, which helps women who face abuse or violence.
Feminine products are always so expensive, and it's hard for some people that are struggling financially to attain them and kind of get them. And since we're all girls, we kind of know the struggle, so.
Hi.
My name is Jessica, and we're here with almost 100 purses filled with feminine hygiene products and other toiletries to donate.
Oh, wow. We didn't expect that at all. Right. Great.
You can write something, you can draw something, you can do whatever you want.
I think like people are quick to judge, and so this is kind of an experience that can show that people get along well regardless of their faith or their religion.
For me, I think it's just amazing to meet new people who have different religions and learn about the religions, as well as working to do something together to help others.
And we are the next generation.
By embracing our differences and learning about each other's differences, I think we can reach love or peace or Salaam, Shalom. So.
Nice, bravo. It's funny. I think for many years of my life, I woke up in a Muslim house in a Christian world and went to a Jewish school, literally. And so having that experience from such a young age, there was no room for hate because I knew all the overlaps so well. And in fact, it was a sort of shocking. I was like, we're all kind of exactly the same in a way. I would love to talk to ASIYAH and Olivia a bit more. What are the things, do you find that when you approach people at this age, are they surprised by the connections that they have? Are they open to them? When you're dealing with such young people, what are their reactions to really realizing the similarities?
To be quite honest, when we filmed that shot, I received a very shocking question from one of the kids who actually asked, what is Islam? Like what is a Muslim individual? They had no idea. This was at one of the Jewish day schools. So it just kind of speaks to the fact that we need to keep informing the youth, especially about culture and religion and what's going on in the world around them, because I think sometimes we are so in tune with our own identity that we block out the other parts of the world that are going on simultaneously. I just also love to bring light to the fact that my best friend, who was featured in that clip, is my co-leader, and she's Muslim and she's from Palestinian descent. And so when we went into the classrooms, I think like making that clear that yes, we have different views, but we have the same love, and that is what was important to highlight. And our friendship is a testament to that.
Wonderful, ASIYAH. When you reach out to these people, what are the best outcomes? How do you see them change? What are the things that they do? How do they act? How do you see the changes manifest?
So I think in the work that I've done, so I went for most of my life from middle school up until high school. I went to a predominantly white institution. I was the only identifiable hijabi, so I was the only Muslim in my middle school and upper school. So that's also part of the reason why I did decide to join the Sisterhood, because to kind of have that representation, to have people who look like you and to be in a safe space where you can openly and freely be yourself was really important for me. And then to just kind of answer the question, so in my high school, in my middle school, I was actually asked by a lot of my teachers to come to their classrooms and to to talk about Islam and to just, like Olivia said, educate, like to actually show that, like you said, we have so many similarities, but because of the media, because of what we are told, like we're so like people try to divide us, but like, Islamic values, like they're human values. We teach about peace, we teach about love. So I feel like teaching that to people and just kind of sharing that like Islam, like all religions are religions of love and of just kinship, friendship, is I think like that's what gets people, that's what kind of creates those connections. And I always get responses like, oh my gosh, like I never knew this. Wow, this is so interesting. Like, thanks for sharing. And like that's what makes me happy. That's what kind of keeps me going and kind of encourages me to kind of keep doing this work, because like you said, like children are the next generation. So like as we keep educating them, we're helping to build a better future for ourselves. So
absolutely. Any of my change makers want to comment about this in terms of education? I know, Mark, you're doing some work with New York State in sort of comparative religions in terms of bringing this knowledge to younger and younger people. Can you talk about that work you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a project, a pilot project right now in New York City, and we've done our work around the country, and it's actually been recognized internationally as a best practice for teaching about religious difference. The intention is that not just training teachers, which we normally do in our pedagogy, the 7 principles for inclusive education, but to actually train a group of students and a group of parents and the faculty in ways of thinking about the dynamics of identity, how identities become salient for us, how do we unravel our own stereotypes and pre-existing biases, and then also, what are the ways in which we respond to conflict? How are we kind of set up? Are you someone who avoids conflict? Are you someone who seeks collaboration? Or are you more a person who likes to compromise? All of these, if you will, are the hard skills that are necessary for us to navigate what seems like insurmountable waters around differences. And I just wanted to highlight the point that I think I was listening, Riyadh, to your comments about how you grew up. And as someone who grew up Christian in the United States and in New York City and in Harlem and the Bronx, even though there are levels of privilege and access that I may not have as an African-American person, the greatest gift I've received by working at and now leading Tannenbaum is knowing the privilege and power that comes with being a Christian person in the United States, and the great responsibility that it is to make space for the work that is being done by the Sisterhood and other organizations, because that kind of othering, if you are Christian in the United States, depending on the denomination that you're a part of, whether it's a very small Christian denomination that also may experience otherness, there is a responsibility that we have to education and providing the context, and not necessarily going in to do the work, but like all good allies, holding the space so that the work can be done.
Nice. Nice. Jennifer, did you want to jump in there? I'm sort of reading your face.
Every time someone speaks, I then think, oh, I just want to underscore that point now. But a couple of things that occurred to me while Olivia and ASIYAH were talking. One is, what I find both hopeful and challenging in this work is that we don't know what we don't know. So education is such an essential key, and we have to keep the refrain going over and over again. We have to get these things into the curriculum so they're not a surprise, or they happen this year but not the next year. So that's number one. The second point I wanted to just make is I love all the comments about differences and similarities that we hear in the film and that we saw in that last clip. And in my work, I found that it's really important to underscore both. So there are these irreducible differences, and I wouldn't want the world to look differently. I love the rich texture that our differences provide, right? And then there are these undeniable similarities that come from our shared humanity and all the places where our values overlap. And I like to think about that as the paradox of similarity and difference. And that's the place when I was working in seminaries, educating future Christian ministers, which a huge responsibility in this whole landscape we're discussing. But that's the place that I would try to emphasize that we need to live, because I think we get into problems when we try to simplify and stay in one or the other side of that equation, because both are true, and that's so great. And I see the teens doing that in their work with the overlapping circles. So I applaud all the work that's going on through this organization and wanted to highlight those points.
Yeah.
Can I
JALAYA. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sheryl. Sheryl, you go, and then JALAYA, I'll get to you right after. Go ahead, Sheryl.
So what Jennifer said about similarities and differences, one of the things we strive to achieve in the Sisterhood of Salaam Shalom is that differences are positives, not negatives, and to embrace those differences as a way of understanding each other's stories and learning about each other, and striving to have more and more differences that we can learn about.
JALAYA, over to you. Excellent, excellent.
I think it was perfect for Sheryl to go right before me, because that's what I wanted. She just kind of laid the framework out. What we've been doing with Learning for Justice, particularly, is for the last 30 years, we were called Teaching Tolerance, and then we shifted our work over to Learning for Justice. But the work focused on when we think about systems change, really getting to teachers to how to talk about differences and how to respect, to enter education from an anti-bias, anti-racist perspective and an anti-bias, anti-racist view. So if you can get to teachers, they can get to students, and they can get to students, you can kind of put a new seed in if they're not getting that at home in their own communities. As we just shifted our name to Learning for Justice, and there's a new phase 30 years later, we want to continue that legacy of anti-bias, anti-education, but in accepting difference, but also now, how do you continue to uplift these social justice standards we have? We call them identity, diversity, justice and action. How do you now take those differences and how do you come together with those differences, and how do you now even expand outside of educators and classrooms, communities, and with caregivers, and how together a joint effort is put around uplifting difference and using difference as like a way to tell a new story, saying all of our differences together is a new story, and we're coming together to really impact justice and really define what justice looks like on the ground. So I really appreciate the difference is good. The fabric of diversity, that's who we are. It makes us who we are. And so I'm really proud to be a part of work that really builds curriculum and talks about the differences amongst us, and how do you have conversations about our histories, sometimes the hardest history, and critical conversations about who we are as people and what our stories look like, but how difference has been underpinned and how we uplift that, and we teach that. And we teach that out of respect, not a value of other people and other people's story and culture. So that's, the film just uplifted that. And I'm so proud to probably take the film and really align it with what we're already teaching and what we have in place in our curriculum and our approach to education and education systems change.
Wonderful. I have one more question before I get to you, KIRSTEN, about impact. Is this has come up a couple times in the chat, and Mark had talked about insurmountable differences, and I think the big elephant in the room is people are going to think, oh no, we can't get Jews and Muslims together because they're going to disagree about Israel and Palestine, and that's going to be a wedge that's going to keep people together. Can Sheryl, if you want to talk, how do you handle that? Because again, differences and differences of opinion are not necessarily a problem. How do you handle that in the sisterhood?
So we don't have enough time to get into the details, but what I can share is it's all about sharing your story. It's not about I'm right, you're wrong, here's the facts. It's about this is my story, this is how it impacts on me, and listening not with our ears, but with our heart. And when women and girls join the sisterhood, they agree that we are not going to engage in challenging conversations, including Israel and Palestine, until we've been meeting for about 1.5 years or so. Why? That's when we've built trust and respect for one another, and our heart listens, not our ears. And it's when we get to that brave point where we say, we're not trying to convince one another, but I really want to learn from you. I want to understand what pains you, and I want to understand what your experience has been. And maybe I will still have the same opinions I will have, but by listening to your story, I will be a changed person. And I will probably see the world through a different lens.
Yes.
And I just wanted to add that if you go to our website, you will see under resources, there's videos about engaging in challenging conversations. There's also resource material that was developed for us by Auburn Theological Seminary as to how to enter into it. And anyone can reach out to me. And we would be happy to have a one-on-one meeting to really spend the time that's needed to really answer your question, Riaz. So I
think even what you said is exactly it, is that those conversations can come later. They don't have to come first. That when you have them first, you engage intellectually, when you don't engage with your heart. For years, I've led difficult conversations for about 5 years on subjects like gun control and abortion. I mean, bringing people, liberals and conservatives, that don't want to talk together. And the one mandate I give them is to ask of the person, what is it about your life I don't know? Because everything you need to know is being said while you're not talking. So you already know what's inside your head. What is it about your life I don't know? And then that's the place to start. When you're talking about the website, great, this is perfect because it's a perfect transition to impact. KIRSTEN, to you, what do you personally and Transform and Odyssey Impact hope for the film and for the campaign? What do you guys have planned? You're hiding
I
behind
did it. I did it
again.
again. There we go. So we have a year-long impact campaign. The film will be available beyond that, but really we have the next solid year where we are working with the 180 chapters in the Sisterhood to get the film to as many communities as we can, really to inspire dialogue and working together through cross organizations, interfaith organizations. The film, has three basic calls to action that we're focusing on over the next year. And if I can just ask Evie, who's our Director of Social Impact, who's in the background and is awesome, she's going to share screen a little bit where you can go and become involved in the campaign. So the first thing to do is think about, are you wanting to bring something like the film to your community, which could be a catalyst for bridge building, for work between organizations who may not have worked together before, for work between organizations or houses of worship or different faiths that haven't worked together in your community before. So the film was made for just, it's only 40 minutes, specifically to inspire discussions and dialogue following. So that's really the cornerstone, the foundation of the campaign. So really host a screening is one of the calls to action. Stepping out of your comfort zone and committing to engaging in conversation with someone unlike yourself is a second call to action. And a third is really reaching out to different faith groups in your community or in your region, using that curiosity, collaborating on issues or community needs is a great way to begin. So we're just excited that there's this whole year where people can really get involved. When you do decide to host a screening, you will get a whole suite of amazing guides and things to help you. If you can go to the discussion guides right there, you get a facilitator's guide, which is an easy checklist through the process of hosting a screening and a discussion. We also have a community discussion and resource guide, and we have a classroom discussion guide as well. So I just want to thank the Pluralism Project for signing on and helping us create the classroom discussion guide. And as you can see, our very own Jennifer Howe Peace and Janet Penn, who works with the Sisterhood on creating resources. They both were super involved in the discussion and resource guide for the community. So you have these rock stars right here with you, and this is what you get when you sign on to bring this to your community. You also get all of the social media and the posters and all the marketing materials you need to do to invite people to that screening. And obviously we're all doing this virtual now, so it's a great community event when we're all so in isolation to just bring people together like this within your own community. And we hope sometime in this year to be doing this in person as well. So it's great that we have both options for us. So thank you, Riaz. And if you just go to the website, the very first thing you'll see is request more information, and that will get you directly in touch with us. It's as easy as that. And we hope you'll join us in this work.
I think what is amazing about the organization of both Transform Films and Odyssey is that it's not just about making the film and telling the story, but then empowering people to share that story and a guide to do it, because these are intense conversations. They can be, and so there's structure to it. And I think that's what you, as filmmakers, both of you have done, is not only given the template through the film, but given the template in the real world. And so, Katie and Kirsten, that's amazing work to put out there. It really allows people to not feel overwhelmed by the darkness, to feel like there is a path forward. I want to check in with the chat moderators, ASIYAH and Olivia. Any new questions coming from you guys that you would like to bring to the panel? And then we'll do one last question for everybody before our 75 minutes are up. Then we'll go to the after party Zoom.
Which you're all invited to.
We're all invited to. Bring your own drinks again and your own snacks. Not for profit, people. Atiya and Olivia, what do you have for us? Any questions that have come in?
Yes, so I have a question from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and it's for the panelists. How has this kind of interfaith or interreligious work changed you?
I would say I would actually love to start with Sheryl. Actually, let's start with Sheryl, and then we'll go to Atiya and see how has it changed you.
My life is so much richer. I have changed both as a person observing my faith, by learning more about Judaism from other Jewish sisters and from answering questions from my Muslim sisters. I have expanded my knowledge so much about Islam and understanding the experiences of my sisters. And I have, most importantly, I feel love that I don't think I could have felt. It's not the love of a spouse or my children, but it's love for my sisters I never would have experienced. And I have hope. I have hope. And one of the only reasons I have hope is that there are over 8,000 women and girls that are praying with their feet, that are saying no to hate. Unlike what I experienced and what I saw in Poland, what's the difference now? Because there are so many similarities. The difference is people are rising up and peacefully speaking and acting out. And that's what the Sisterhood of Salaam Shalom is all about. I've got hope.
Nice. Atiya, you?
Again, I'll just say kind of amen to what Sheryl said. The friendships that I have developed, particularly with Sheryl and other friendships that I've developed, long-lasting, very deep relationships with my Muslim sisters as well. I'm focusing really on my Jewish sisters. We cried together. We have laughed together. We have traveled together. We have had very intense conversations together. Most recently on our trip to the border, a Mexican border, looking up at a wall, going through checkpoints and then reflecting that with the Palestine-Israeli issue. I have grown so much in terms of my learning of Judaism, of enjoying Jewish practices that have made me really reflect upon how is Islam in the next generations going to exist as an American Islam. I know that Muslims have been part of the fabric of this country for hundreds of years, but institutionally, they are the new kids on the block. And it's very fascinating to me how my children, my grandchildren, the next generations are going to, fashion an American Islam, which will not be a monolithic thing, but we can learn from our Jewish sisters in the Jewish community. And like I said, this has been, I treasure the relationships that I have forged and look forward to really many, many, many more.
Speaking of hope, I'm going to ask the other panelists, what is bringing you hope right now? Jennifer, let's start with you. What's bringing you hope?
Wow. Yeah, it depends on what day you get me.
Oh, we're all on the Corona coaster. It all depends on the day.
Today, what is bringing me hope? I think when people enter with fear and hesitation and they leave with this open-hearted curiosity, that the potential for that transformation, which I've had the privilege of seeing as an educator sort of over and over again when I work with Jewish, Christian, and Muslim students in particular, the potential for that transformation is what really gives me hope. Like, we seem to be wired in such a way that we can hold ourselves apart and be really closed off and fearful, and then something can shift. The conditions can be created in which we are able to express and experience a different kind of relationality, and something just shifts. And that gives me so much hope. Thank goodness that we are wired that way. And I love seeing work where that's happening. So I think I'll leave it at that.
Wonderful. And just before I get to Mark and JALAYA, if people have not put the one word in, now that you've seen and experienced this panel, please add your one word to the chat thread so we can make sure that that gets compilated into that special thing we're going to send out as a follow-up. JALAYA, what is giving you hope these days?
You know, I hear people say, I don't want to hear people talk about what's happening. I wish they would stop talking. I'm actually glad people are talking. Consciousness. People have consciousness that people are ready and they're awakened and they want to do something and they want to see what that means. And they want to, if nothing else, they want to talk about it. And they want to be a part of dialogue and conversation, an authentic conversation of what it means to them. So that's hope, because that is the potential for so much power and so much change and so much to come out of it. And the fact that people, I know we should not be together, but I'm so glad people still want to be together. Like that, I always say that's a good thing that it's not good that we are together. That's not good. But the fact that we want to be together, that we still have a connection to each other is so hopeful. So when we do get off this, what you call the Corona coaster, we can meet and take the photos at the end and say we made it through and we can continue to work ahead. So it's the people who are ready to talk, who are ready to get together and who want to pick up and keep going.
Amen. Amen. Mark, to you, what is giving you hope right now?
I think we're at a time, and the film and the Sisterhood are an example, where as a global humanity, we see the insufficiency of the structures and the relationships that we've created. And our souls are hungry for more. And what gives me hope is that hunger. I would be far more hopeless if we were not yearning for more and people were not taking action for more. The other thing that gives me hope with this is that even in this community, the communities that are being explored where this work is being done, there are communities of unheard and unknown voices, even beyond the two that are being explored here. And what gives me hope is that the example that's shown opens the doorway and creates the table for those unheard voices, even more on the fringes, to come in and be heard and to offer something in this transformation that we're all going through. So that gives me hope.
Well said, beautifully said. At this time, we are nearing the close of our town hall. You're gonna see a quick pop-up poll that we're gonna share with you. And while you see that, just so you know, this entire event has been recorded and it's gonna be available on Odyssey Impact's website and their YouTube page. All the registrants are going to receive a link by email when the recording is prepared. And please, please feel free to share this with your networks. That's the whole point. We want more and more ripples. If you enjoyed today's discussion, we encourage you to consider hosting one of these virtual screenings of Stranger Sister with your community, your organization, your family, your house of worship. Again, the more people who have eyes on this, the more change, the more transformation, the more hope. On behalf of Odyssey Impact, Transform Films, the Sisterhood of Salaam, Shalom, these wonderful people who I have really enjoyed spending time with over the past few days. An enormous thank you for being here. We know that this has been a rough year and everyone has been in their own rabbit hole and now we are emerging. So what we want you to do is to emerge with hope, with excitement to get to know other people, hear their stories. And so thank you for spending your time with us. We know, again, Zoom can be a little overwhelming, but really this community is what is needed to move forward. So thank you to our panel. Thank you to our wonderful talent who created the story and to, of course, our storytellers who I am so proud of you guys for this because it's your big moment where it goes out into the world. So thank you all so much for joining us. Have a wonderful evening and hopefully you can take this and continue your story. We would love to hear more about the screenings that you have and the conversations you have. So this is not the end, this is just the beginning. So please keep us posted and have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Beautiful.